turn the focus a little bit towards you for a second.
Oh, good Lord.
You just wrote a piece for the Jerusalem Strategic Tribune.
I did. It was fun.
On the UK, in which you wove in your own family history. You talked about the industrial decline of northern England and the effects that that has had upon the local population. Can you talk a little about that?
Sure, and I think it's one of those things when I was writing it. I mean, this is a tale that, we see in Germany. It's going back to Germany. You go to the Ruhr Valley, that's a big AFD part of the country. It used to be a steel producing, used to be an industrial base for Germany. You see this in the United States and in the post-industrial parts of the United States, whether it be in parts of Ohio or Michigan. The reality is that for the UK, the North was the engine of the empire. It was steel, it was coal, it was so much that fueled its exports and empire around the world. But Manchester, Middlesbrough, which is where my mother is from, which was nothing, probably around 1800, and it grew into this industrial base, really big British steel production there. You go up to Newcastle. They used to have, in Scotland, massive shipbuilding, also in Belfast. These have gone away, and there are a lot of reasons why. Modernization, they just really couldn't compete. Labor unionism was not helpful back in the 70s. And for people in the United States, they really don't understand how bad things were in the 1970s in Britain. I mean, they had rolling blackouts. The trash was literally not picked up. They had, for Billy Elliot, that wonderful film about this young boy in a very sort of working class part where his part of the country, his father and brother were protesting and striking, and he was studying dance. That was really what it was like all across the UK. And so when Margaret Thatcher came in, there was radical reform that needed to happen. They could not maintain these industries, so they went away. And Middlesbrough is just a shell of its former self. And, I haven't been there in a long time, but I remember going there when I was probably 19 with my grandfather to go get, because I've retained my British passport, to go get my national insurance card, equivalent of a social security card. And waiting in that government office, it was just a sad place. And I think, there is really a loss that people feel of identity, of self, of importance, of community, of cohesion. And, the promises that politicians across the board have made in the UK about the promise of a good future has just not borne out. And I think you can see that across many industrialized economies in the world. We just talked about Germany, we talked about the United States. This is very true in the United Kingdom as well. So, these voters, whether they be certain AFD voters, a lot of Trump voters, in this instance, in the UK, they just had by-elections where Reform, which is the Nigel Farage sort of upstart party, they did very well. I think at this point, the political class really needs to start listening to them. But again, it's not just listening to them and giving them pablum back. There has to be real results. And that's the challenge for some of these upstart parties, like Nigel Farage's UKIP party, for example. Actually, he's Reform, it was UKIP, or even the AFD. They have to be more than just anger, fear, and hate. And that's something to get people to the polls, but you've actually got to be reasonable in terms of a governing agenda. I do not think Reform is capable of doing that in the UK, but they've certainly tapped a lot of anger. And with the AFD, they're, in my opinion, their sort of radicalism when it comes to embracing, or some of them embracing, some of Germany's more difficult past, shall we say, and frankly being far too pro-Russian, are going to be problems. But it's up to the established political class to actually challenge these parties in a real and meaningful way. And right now, whether it be in the UK or in Germany, it has not worked, but we'll see.
It is the disintegration of political systems, isn't it?
I don't know if it's political systems, but certainly of the established political parties certainly being challenged. France is an ungovernable mess. You have to be very careful too. This is what I meant about, when the German government decided to label the AFD, and I would be much more comfortable with that being resolved at the ballot box and through politics. is that when you start denying people who their vote or their choice, and they think that it's a bureaucracy blocking, that makes them even more angry. So I think the established political systems have to be, and political parties have to be careful. They can also be strong, and they should also challenge them. There's no reason to be weak. Challenge them, debate them, engage them, and engage their voters. And, just retreating in when it comes to the UK, just to Westminster and to the South and London is not going to do you any favors there. And lastly, I would note the one very interesting thing about Donald Trump, and he's a sort of different figure, but the thing that I admire about Donald Trump and his team that he's always understood is that you have to go directly to voters. And he has built, and his team has built, an incredible communications infrastructure to inform their voters. Now, some might say that some of the information that they give out directly to some of their followers and their voters may not exactly be accurate, and I would say that's correct. But they've understood that they don't need the Washington bubble. And so when I think about some of the politics of Europe, whether it be London, Berlin, Brussels, Paris, if they only are listening to or thinking about the bubble press and are not actually going and engaging their voters directly, they're going to lose every time. It is so important that they think differently about voter engagement. And I'm not saying they have to do it in an American way, but they certainly have to do it differently than they've been doing it. And they also actually have to make real progress and show voters that they're hearing them and taking action.